my spiritual practices are absolutely essential to my life. They establish, we sometimes, and this is how I describe it to my son, so our prayers that we undertake 5 times a day, I consider them to be breaks from the matrix. So the matrix is the world, what we call the dunya, the material world that lulls us into ascribing so much importance to it, to the money, to the fame, to the whatever is your drug, and we all have one. And the prayers, which are specifically set out at appointed times in the day, break you out of the matrix and return you to the vertical relationship, which is at the core of everything that we do, or should be at the core of everything that we do as Muslims. So that moment where you're in the middle of something that seems really important and like everyone's stressed, and you break out of it and you recenter with God, and you remind yourself that actually the most important things are a set of values that you need to implement within yourself, and everything else is in God's hands, and you let go. That's a spiritually very powerful and important point in my day. And I feel very blessed that we have that moment spread out, for some of us 5 times a day, for others 3 times a day, depending on what tradition you follow. Fasting, there are so many merits to fasting that are known. Nowadays we see people vaunt them that don't even kind of do it within a spiritual paradigm. But I think every Ramadan, which is the month in which we fast as Muslims, many of us think, oh my God, how am I going to do it? Because even if you do it every year you get to it and you're like, a month, it's a long time to not eat between the hours of sunrise and sunset. And for most of us who are really busy juggling multiple things, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to get through the day without a coffee? The beauty of Ramadan is so many things. It's a reminder of what you can achieve. The health benefits that are insane. Most of us take about a week to adjust, but a week in, you feel re-energized, re-empowered. There is a spiritual strength that you derive, I think, not just from the trust that you place in God, in saying, I am going to forgo food and drink, as we say, fi sabilillah, for the sake of God, and that I'm doing this in unison with all of my brethren. And it reinforces a sense of solidarity. And it also is a crucial reminder of what hunger feels like, so that you can never get too complacent. Because if you don't know what hunger and thirst feel like, which, by the way, most of us in the West don't. I mean, not everyone. There are people struggling to feed their kids. Most people are not, and in many cases have the opposite problem. If you don't know what that feels, I sense that it might erode something deep inside you when it comes to having empathy towards those who do. We see huge donations to charity during Ramadan for multiple reasons. One being that there is additional spiritual merit to kind of donations in that period. But I do think it's because there is a softening of the heart that happens during these periods of, almost like spiritual marathons that we go to. Because, of course, Ramadan is not just fasting, right? Most of us are trying to read the whole Quran, because Ramadan is the month in which the Quran was revealed. So each of us are trying to read the Quran throughout the whole month, so that we have essentially rejuvenated ourselves with the word in that month. And so it's a bit like training to be then equipped to go back out into the world after Ramadan, grounded and spiritually reinforced. So, these traditions are essential for me, to balance what I consider to be balance in my heart, what I consider to be priorities in my life. I think centering God is a really important way of refusing to accept the demands that the material world wants to make on our souls. We are not just cogs within a capitalist system. We are souls in a human body, as Oprah regularly reminds us. And as such, we have a much bigger responsibility, I think, on this earth than simply to increase profit margins. I think that it would be a shame if that was the legacy most of us leave behind.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully put. Satan is the father of lies, and he is the one who wants to divide. When I hear you speak about your beautiful Islamic spiritual practices, it literally makes me think of what we share in common as Christians. When I hear you speak about Ramadan, it makes me think of Lent. When I hear you speak about praying 5 times a day, it makes me think about how priests and female religious as well pray the liturgy of the hours 5 times a day.
Mm.
And also, something that St. John Paul II once says. He once said, I'll never forget this. He said, look at the Muslims. Look at how wherever they are, wherever they may be throughout the day, they will make time to pray 5 times a day. And consider even their example in terms of fasting, how committed they are. Consider that spiritual example, the prayer and fasting, and compare it to how many of the great Christian cathedrals in Europe remain empty. And I thought to myself, that was a striking observation. I've had the opportunity of partaking in Christian Muslim dialogue. And when I leave that encounter, whether it's with an imam or whether it's other Muslims, that encounter inspires me to be a better Christian. It's not let's turn each other into Muslims or Christians, but it is, hey, I see a person of deep faith. I see a person who loves God. I see a person who has transcended or is at least humbly trying to transcend, as you say, the matrix, the seductions of the false idols, the golden calves, the materialism, all these things, riches, quote unquote, that eventually just lead to sadness. So and emptiness because they cannot fulfill you. Only God can fulfill
Absolutely. I
you.
mean, that's the big lie of our current era, this idea that accumulation of stuff is somehow eventually, if you get more or more and more, because it's never enough, you're going to somehow find happiness at the end of that route. And don't see any evidence of that amongst the upper echelons of people that I know who do have immense wealth. Wealth makes life a lot easier, absolutely. But can it bring you peace? Can it bring you happiness? No, it cannot. And that's where there is, understanding of the world that is steeped in materialism, that spirituality, almost regardless of what stream you take to that ocean, is going to provide you with almost like a bigger picture understanding of the world, in which richness goes far beyond the material and can be found in friendship, in community, in compassion, in helping others. And the societies that I tend to be most drawn to are those not that kind of idealize the golden calf of wealth and money, but those where there's a much bigger focus on the notion of community and spirituality at the heart of them. And I see immense richness in those spaces.